Hi everyone, Gary O'Neill. Welcome to N2ITIV Solutions. And today we're going to talk about why you should think big and start small. And I really started looking at kind of the landscape of businesses today, right? You have a lot of the institutional businesses out there that have boatloads of cash and they have retail space and all this stuff. And then you have these kind of what I like to call small crack team entrepreneurs that are developing all these cool ideas under the radar and are then able to scale and ramp things up very quickly. And I was trying to figure out what the differences were. And it's really an old school mentality versus a new school mentality. And I always hate using that type of language because, it's not necessarily fair, but in I think this case it's indicative of what's going on. And to me, I boiled it down to the big difference between the two is learning, adjusting, and executing. And I'll show you an example of who's not doing that. And you look at a company like JCPenney, right? Big excitement about relaunching the brand and making it, viable for the cooler crowd and trying to keep their old crowd. And they made a tremendous mistake in thinking that they were just going to be able to just roll this idea out with no learning and no adjusting. They went right to execution. So they didn't talk to the consumer. They didn't figure out what those needs and wants were and operate from a customer point of view. They operated from more of an ego-driven view of, hey, we're a big company. We can throw millions into advertising and marketing and all these different things. But at the end, it didn't register. So, they spent all this money without even talking to the people that they wanted to get. And that is really an amazing thing when I think about it. But then on the flip side, what happens if they would have just decided, hey, you know what? Let's take a small sample of stores, 100, 150 instead of 1,200, and let's figure out what the customer really expects and wants from us. And once we understand a lot more of that, then let's make the correct adjustment in those stores to figure out and execute that. So once we understand and get closer and we're in a rhythm with the customer, now we have the ability to scale it out and have a comfort level that it's going to be successful. But when you don't do that, it's like throwing darts around. I don't care how much money you have. If you're trying to relaunch something from an old school standpoint, you have to get some insights on it. But then you see the new guys. You see the Instagrams and the Facebooks and the Pinterest and, and the Twitter. And those guys are under the radar. They come out with something viable. They do it in a very small sample to figure out what they need to do. And then once they get it, they're able to scale and ramp up immediately, like within a year or two. I mean, Instagram I think they sold their company within 2 or 3 years for $1 billion to Facebook. So it really just teaches me, and it should teach you as an entrepreneur, that make sure you're getting enough information from your customer and go small at the beginning. And don't be afraid of people stealing your idea, because if your learning and your insights are going to give you a much more pragmatic product than somebody that's just going out there thinking that they can outspend you. Think about that, because it's important to understand that, because in today's age, if you have a couple blips, you're running uphill and it just becomes tough because they don't want to spend money. The people are behind. You got all these negative things that you're having to deal with. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it, but really take that to heart, because I think if you start small and understand how to learn, adjust, and execute, you'll be a lot more successful.